Today I want to talk about data science and how its use in the public sector will have a great effect on our society going forward. Let's first look at how it's currently used in a few cases in the criminal justice system. So, bail is something that you have to pay if you're the defendant of a crime, and so it means that instead of staying in jail until your court date, you can leave as long as you pay bail. And you get your bail money back when you come back for your court date. So it's meant to be a way to incentivize people to show up for their court date and not leave. And for some crimes, bail is set, and other crimes it's not. And if it's not set, you don't have to pay anything to leave. So the goal of bail is to try to get people who they think might not show up to show up by assigning higher amounts. And people who they think will show up, they don't need to assign any amounts because they're pretty sure they're going to show up anyway. And so they use models for that to predict whether someone's going to show up. The other thing is predictive policing. So trying to say, based on past data on where crimes have been committed, trying to figure out where the next crime will be committed. So these are two pretty exciting examples, and they have some advantages over a system that just relies on humans to make these decisions. So it has the potential to reduce bias. So if your algorithms to predict where crime is being committed or what to set bail, it's not at the whim of whether the judge had lunch that morning or some other subconscious factor that's influencing them, like the race of the defendant, unless that information is provided to the algorithm itself. The other thing is it can improve the accuracy of these systems because machine learning can become very highly accurate at predicting these results, so more accurate than humans doing the same task. And the third thing is, hopefully it would be able to tell you why they're making the decision. You can kind of ask people why they made a decision, but they're not always honest, or maybe they don't know themselves. But if you have the right kind of algorithm, you can understand why it chose A or B. However, there are some dangers, and this is why I want to talk about them today, is because it's important to keep these in mind. The first thing is the opposite of transparent, which is opacity. And so just because the algorithms can be designed to tell you why they made a decision, they're often not designed to do that because they're created by private companies, and those companies say that the workings of the algorithm are trade secrets. So then you have no way of knowing why it decided to do something. And that can lead to, or can contribute to, actually increasing bias. Because if you don't know why it decided something, then maybe it's using some kind of factor that we would consider to be unfair to change someone's judgment based on just that factor. For instance, if two people have all the same attributes about them besides their race, and then you're trying to set bail for them, an algorithm that sets an African American person with a higher amount than a white person, we would consider that to be pretty unfair because it's not the fault of those people what their skin is, and they have no choice in the matter, so why are we punishing someone for something that they're born with? So this is a potential problem with these algorithms. So yes, I went into opaque algorithms. They just give predictions based on inputs, and they don't tell you why. Yes, and so a protected category, maybe race, gender, something like that. The other thing is that maybe you don't feed the algorithm in race because you don't want it to predict someone's bail based on their race, but you feed in something else, like maybe where they live, and that is highly correlated with race. So then unintentionally, you'd say on average, someone with similar things besides where they live is going to make them have a higher bail, and so that on average is going to say that African Americans have a higher bail amount because predominantly they live in these neighborhoods. So it can get complicated, and then the question is, okay, so what is fair? So let's look at some solutions here. The first is just having simple algorithms where you can tell why it's doing something. You're pretty sure it's not, where you can morally stand behind it. And the other one is to really look at fairness itself and try to optimize for that. So the simple algorithm, here's just an example. For bail, we just look at the age of the defendant and the number of past court dates they missed, and together this score can kind of give you a sense of how likely they are to not show for the court date. So this is advantageous maybe over some very complicated algorithm because we can look at this and say, okay, I'm okay deciding based on these two factors whether someone's going to get bailed. That seems pretty fair. And yeah, so that could be something that's helpful. The other thing is a little more complicated, but instead of just saying, I want to predict, what if they think you're not going to show up for your court date, you can say, I want to predict that, but I also want to make it so that someone who is of this race versus this race, they're going to get the same results or similar enough results. Or you could say, on average, this race will get similar results. So these are all things that you can include in the process of selecting your algorithm. So like I said, using data science in the public sector has the opportunity to improve services and fairness, but it also leads to this kind of centralization of power. And if we don't have all the right people involved in that decision-making process, you can easily end up with outcomes that are more biased or more harmful than the previous human judges in the past. Also, the other thing is to make sure that this is a process so you don't just create an algorithm and say, okay, it's good. You want to analyze it for fairness. You want to keep iterating over it to have something that everyone can agree on.